Thank you so much. We're going to do things a little bit different. In the past, we have always, at the end of all of our events, we ask you for evaluations. And one of the things that we heard time and time and time again is give us some updates about what has happened since the last time we were together. So we're going to take advantage of that. We love the fact we can give this away. We have a sponsor that we're going to highlight in the next few minutes. We're going to give you some updates. I'm going to invite Pastor Tom and Pastor Brian, if they would come and join me up here on the platform. Thank you, sweetheart. And we're going to do all of that business up front. And then we're going to come back together for some worship, for some prayer, and we're going to ask God to show up and touch us in the way that only God can. Is that okay with you? All right, we're going to do that, and we're excited about it. Pastor Brian, I know that in a while you have some notes, and maybe this would be helpful for you. So I'm going to ask you to sit right here, if you would. And I'll sit in the middle of these two good-looking guys. I wanted you to know that we do read the evaluations. So everything from food to locations to whatever we ask you about at the end of this event, and Valerie will talk to you about that. We actually looked those over, and we want to give you some updates as to what happened. So the last time we were together was at Summit. And at that time, I talked about in my address to you, we talked about 5 non-negotiables. And we also talked about our Chi Alpha initiative for that year, or for this year that we're in. And these were the things that we talked about the most. I want to remind you what those non-negotiables were. Those non-negotiables were remaining Pentecostal, maintaining our mission focus, emphasizing church multiplication, which in Oregon, church multiplication actually means 3 things. That is church planning, but it's also PACs, our parent-affiliated churches, and our reset, which is our word for revitalize. We talked about more connections with our ministers. How could we encourage and foster more connections with our ministers? And then the last thing we talked about was we are going to fight for unity. We're going to fight for unity, that we are going to ask God what God wants us to do, and then together we're going to do it. And I know it's a cliche in these days to say together is better, but I actually believe it. I don't know how better to say it than that. And I think that we can do this together. Our commitment to remain Pentecostal, for several of you, just a half an hour ago, you were with us in the upstairs room. And you know that we are going to always front load everything we do with prayer. And we're going to ask God to be there. And I'm hoping that in this event for the next couple of days, that our Pentecostal heart and who we are will be very evident. And I'm hoping that the unity that we want to promote will be very evident. Now at Summit, in some of these other areas, John Easter was our speaker, and he challenged us to raise up sons and daughters for missions. And then we went to General Council. Many of you, I saw you there. And at General Council, John Easter, man, he just hit it out of the park with a challenge for world missions and raising up sons and daughters. And he asked us as a network to provide specific numbers. So I want to ask Tom, who serves not only as our assistant superintendent, but he also serves as our world missions director. Tom, talk to us about the numbers. Talk about what the presbyters decided last month as well.
Well, thank you, Pastor Lee, and hello, Oregon Ministry Network family. You look great tonight. And could we give a shout out to any of our global missionary family in the house? Could you just stand up right now across this room? Any of our global workers?
Yeah.
Awesome. So glad you're here. So what our National World Missions Director, John Easter, shared was quite sobering. I think anyone who was there was struck by this. If you look back on the history of the Assemblies of God, we've gone through, we've seen the Assemblies of God through all sorts of different crises, world wars and Vietnam and economic crises in the past. And yet, no matter what has happened in the history of this country since the inception of the Assemblies of God, we have increased the number of missionaries that we send, even during wartime, even during the worst economic downturn, even during the Great Depression. And what Pastor Lee and Brian, Pastor Brian, what we've been challenged by, and I know many of you have been, we are at risk of being the first stewards of the assemblies of God to see a plateau or even a decline in the number of world missionaries that we are sending nationwide. And so we can look at this as either something to get defeated by or an opportunity. And I'm so thankful, Pastor Lee, for your leadership to say, let's be part of the solution and believe that there actually is no better time to send missionaries around the world. And so out of that challenge that came at General Council, we were challenged to look at what would we commit? What would we commit to raising up out of our networks? How many would we commit to raising up out of our churches? And right now, our global missionary family stands at about 38 units, which includes, that word unit always seems very cold to me. So if you come up with a better word, please give it to me, give it to us. But unit means either a single missionary or a couple or a family. So if we can come up with a better encompassing word, maybe we can pray for that. We have about in the high 30s of missionary units out of the Oregon Ministry Network. And many of you have been around a lot longer than I have, and you know we have a track record of sending some incredible global workers to the nations of the world. Can we take a moment to just thank God for the missionaries that have come out of Oregon over the years? And so we've been praying, what's our part? What's our part? And you know that if someone today, if you are called to be a missionary, it's not like we just give you a plane ticket and say, head out to the nation of your calling. There's a journey to get there. And so the challenge is, what could we do over the next 8 years? Because 8 years from now would mark the 2000th anniversary of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So should the Lord tarry, what would we commit in Oregon to doing in the next 8 years? And our prayerful commitment is that by the time we get to 8 years from now, that our global missionary family out of Oregon would stand at 75 units. 75 units. Yeah, let's believe for that. And that doesn't mean we just add about 35, 37 to get there. We also account that there are going to be some who will retire during that time, so it's going to be a little bit more than just adding to those who are already part of our global worker family. And at first, that sounds like a big number. But when we start to think about the number of incredible churches that we have in our network, about 175 churches in the Oregon Ministry Network, 177. What if, come on, church, what if each one of us were to begin praying that sons and daughters would be raised up out of our churches? I mean, how many Oregon Ministry Network churches would say, we will commit to praying for at least one to come up out of our church? And then all of a sudden, the numbers become a lot more attainable. And I believe that if we start praying for sons and daughters to come up out of our churches, that it's possible that we will exceed that number. And of course, our minds as pastors go to, well, how are we going to pay for that? And I believe by faith that as we see sons and daughters coming up out of the local church, that will inspire generosity out of the local church. And we believe that finances will follow calling. And we actually see downturn when we start to believe that finances are the one thing that propels it. We want calling to propel it, and we believe that finances will follow. So let's believe that we can be part of reaching the billions, with the B, billions of people on this planet who still need to hear that Jesus Christ gave his life for them.
Tom is going to help us, and we are not going to forget about this challenge. In fact, it's going to be in front of you in everything we do, and as we talk, please pray and ask God, what would God have you do in each of your churches? Another thing we said about world missions is, in this crazy world of travel that our missionaries have to deal with all around the world, they come home, they don't know how long they're going to be home. Sometimes it's months, sometimes it's a year or longer, but there's always been a housing challenge. And one of the things that I said at Summit is, I would love to see a couple of missions houses somewhere on I-5. Now, forgive me for the rest of you. I know we spent most of our ministry career, much of it in Central Oregon, and you go, there you go, talking about I-5. Well, the reality of it is there's better access to the airports, and more than 2/3 of the population live in that area. So our missionaries need to be where they can get and touch as many people as possible. And so we said, Lord, give us a couple of missions houses where they could stay when they're home itinerating. And we've gained some ground. Tell us about it, Tom.
Thank you, Pastor Lee. And I see Joe and Emily Knapp here. And that you could testify, I believe, tonight that when you see the itineration date coming up on the calendar as you're in Ecuador, one of the things that looms is, where are we going to stay? Where are we going to find a place to live? And by the way, you guys are doing an incredible job leading Uncion in Ecuador, in a country that has a lot of its own struggles right now. And we believe that you're the right people for the right moment. Joe and Emily Knapp, we love you guys.
Yeah.
And so Pastor Lee put out the challenge, would any churches be willing to, or do you have property, or could we begin to pray for property where we could house global workers when they're back on itineration? And Pastor Lee, one of the many things I appreciate about you is that you have not asked us as pastors and ministers to do what you've not been willing to do yourself. And you've said, what do we have even in the network that could be a place of housing? And so you have committed, and we're underway in converting the upper level, or a good part of the real estate that we have at the Kaiser Oregon Ministry Network office, into apartment space where global workers can stay. So thank you for leading the way and saying, let's start with us first. And then also, we want to give a huge shout out to Relevant Life in Salem and Pastor Kevin Reich and the Relevant Life family. You have a parsonage. Where are you, Pastor Kevin?
Over there in the left.
Like the spotlight is shining down on you. The rest of the room is in the dark, but there's a little light on Pastor Kevin. And I see your family's with you tonight. Thank you to the Reich family. Thank you to the Relevant Life team and your church family and your deacons, because we know that you could use that home for revenue as a rental space or for other reasons, and you have offered your parsonage property on your Lancaster Drive location to become housing for itinerating global workers and missionaries. So thank you for stepping to the plate and leading the way.
Yeah. So that's two houses since Summit. Now, they're not both completed. One is ready. You can talk to Kevin about that and how those will be managed. Both of them are 3-bedroom. One of them have 1.5 baths. One of them has a yard and a garage, and it's going to be awesome. And then we have Hope Church that for years has had the apartment where the Knapps are currently staying. This is an answer to prayer, and I want to thank you. Now, we need more. We need more help and more workers and more ways to do this, because if God gives us the numbers, I have to tell you what happened to me. I said to this team, do we really, when Kevin and his team stepped up and said, we have this house, I said, do we really need to do the upstairs? And Tom, he just kind of humbled me in the moment. He said, well, you're the one asking for more sons and daughters. We don't want to limit what God might do. So thank God for that. So I also want to shift, if I could, to U.S. missions, and I'm sure Pastor Brian would acknowledge, but let me just jump ahead of that. If you're a U.S. missionary in the house, would you stand up? All right. Woo! Most of you know that we are 2/3 of the way through a 3-year campaign to raise $1 million to reach 1 million college students through Chi Alpha. And Brian, I want you to catch us up on what is going on so far.
Absolutely, Pastor Lee. As he said, we're in the final 6 months of our Accelerate the Now initiative, which was launched at 3 years ago almost at Summit 2023. And as Pastor Lee already said, it was a bold vision. We want to raise $1 million to reach 1 million university students in Oregon. And our Chi Alpha team understands what Jesus said when he said, you have not because you ask not. Yeah. And they have been praying for well over 2 years that God would give them a woman's house near Oregon State University to complement the men's ministry house we already have there. And tonight I want to share some incredible news. And this is the incredible news. Through God's provision and your generosity, this week, actually this Thursday, we'll be closing on a women's house that's 2 blocks from Oregon State University. Isn't that amazing? You walk out the door, you look to the right, and there's the campus. And it's less than a quarter of a mile from our men's ministry home that's already there. And it will accommodate up to 10 ladies that can be there, that can be, imagine the impact. Students being discipled and transformed by Jesus and leaders being raised up. Now, if you'd like to see the men's house that we already have there and the women's house that you're seeing on the screen, but you'd like to walk through the doors, you'd like to see how that's good, how close it is to the campus, you'd like to walk on the campus of Oregon State University, we have a Chi Alpha Vision Day already scheduled for November 13th. Mark it down, write it down right now, take a picture on your screen. I think we're going to have a QR code that's going to come up where you can register. And from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., we would love to host you to come and see. We'll provide lunch, come and see the 2 homes, come and walk the campus, come and pray with us about what God's doing. Now, let me say, this is only possible because of those who have made pledges and promises to help us towards that $1 million, and we've received $448,000 in pledge funds so far, and that's going to cover the down payment. And then the rental income off of that house will cover the remainder of the monthly payments to go towards that woman's house. This is worth celebrating. Can we give the Lord an applause for this? Thank you for your generosity. Now, to strengthen our position, to ensure long-term stability, to enable us to purchase additional ministry houses near other Oregon campuses, we need to continue to pray that God would help us to receive the remaining over $500,000 towards our goal. So you say, how can we help? How can you help us finish strong in these last 6 months of this initiative? I'm going to give you 3 things that you can do. The first one is this. Ask the Lord to help us raise the full $1 million. Yeah. And ask the Lord to give us additional ministry homes like the one he's providing for the ladies. Here's the next thing that you can do. If you're a church and you have an outstanding pledge, now is the time to fulfill it. We got 6 months left. Now is the time. This is critical. You say, well, why is it so important? Because that will allow us to continue to put a larger down payment on the home, reducing the monthly payment. It will also allow us to financially stabilize the men's ministry house and secure a down payment for an additional ministry home. And then finally, if you haven't yet partnered with Accelerate the Now in this initiative, there's no better time to do it than right now at the end in these final 6 months. So I hope that you realize that we're not just merely talking about property or houses. We're talking about souls. Every one of these homes represents a place where souls are going to come, be discipled, meet Christ, be discipled, and be sent out to their world, wherever that looks like, and be a witness for Christ. That's why your partnership is so important. Every gift, every pledge fulfilled helps us with Chi Alpha in Oregon, and helps us to not only in the current, but helps us to give a stable future to Chi Alpha. Together, we're impacting university students here in Oregon. So I encourage you, send your pledges in, continue to have faith and partner with us. And Pastor Lee, let me finish by saying this final thing. And I just want to say on behalf of our entire Chi Alpha team, thank you, Oregon Ministry Network, for your partnership and your generosity. We appreciate it. We couldn't share those pictures and these stories without your help. So thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Fantastic. So a couple of other quick updates. You know, when it comes to church multiplication, which for us, as I said earlier, includes church planning, PAC, and church reset, our church multiplication director, Mark Robinson, I think I saw him back there, and it's either all in the spotlight, Pastor Tom. Yeah. So he tells me that we have 6 new churches currently that are in process of planning brand new churches. Isn't that exciting? Yeah. And we just implemented a process. You know, for years, God has blessed us financially, and we have had money to help plant churches. But a lot of you have said, well, what about us resetting our churches? And we've had Hewitt, and we've had the Marks Endowment, and a couple of other funds that you can make application to. But just recently, I'm talking in the last 2 weeks, we have decided that with some of those church multiplication funds, for those churches that partner are part of the network partnership. Now, that's a key. You might want to consider that as you're planning your budget next year. If you partner in the Oregon Ministry Network Partnership Program with the finances, we are going to make available grants free of charge. You will have to apply, but free of charge to help you with buildings and with resetting and different things in some of the churches that many of you have pastored for years. So that's another thing that's happening, and we're excited about it. When it comes to connecting with our ministers, Cindy and I have been meeting with credential ministers and their spouses. We've currently already met in 4 different regions around the state. We're doing this on Saturday in an event called Lead Together with Lee and Cindy. And the idea is to use our Saturdays because of so many of you be bivocational. And because you are bivocational, we want to make sure we come at a time that you can. And during those times, we're talking, we're praying, we're spending 4 hours together, we're buying you lunch, and we're just answering any questions that you may have. And they've been hugely successful. By the way, if they haven't already been in your region, they're coming to a region near you pretty soon. So you'll hear about that, all right? With our Oregon School of Ministry, it continues to grow. And Yancy Valdez, who is leading that effort, tells me that we currently have 17 certified and licensed ministers in the program. Isn't that exciting? 17. By the way, Yancy, thank you so much for the great job that you're doing there. He also tells me for those seeking ordination that they will be adding the ordination track in February of 26. So it's coming up right away if you want to be part of that. And I'm excited because God is doing great things. Lastly, the presbytery has taken an unprecedented step with Synergy and in a certain direction. And I want Pastor Brian, who, by the way, I didn't formally introduce. Pastor Brian leads U.S. missions for us here in Oregon, among so many other things. Pastor Tom leads our world missions endeavors. So that's the reason between the two when it came to missions. But Pastor Brian is also our secretary and treasurer, and he has oversight for the entire financial responsibilities, the credential responsibilities. By the way, make his job easy. Get your credentials in right away. Right, Brian?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I knew he'd want me to say that. Tell us what we're about to do with our finances and Synergy.
Well, this is something that we've been talking about. We talked about with our presbytery. We've talked about with others. And I just want to start out by saying this, that the Oregon Ministry Network is always striving to adapt to our current ministry needs. And we want to be able to stay strong on mission. We don't want to get distracted. We want to stay strong on what the mission is, to develop effective leaders, and to build healthy churches and ministries. So back in August, our finance committee met. We were looking at budget. We were planning looking forward, and they submitted a proposal to our presbytery. They recommended that the Oregon Ministry Network outsource all its financial and human resource services starting in 2026. Now, this is something that Pastor Lee has been contemplating for almost 3 years, you told me. And we've been talking about it for 2 years, talking about what that might look like. Well, after prayerful consideration, the presbytery approved that proposal this past September, believing that this transition would improve our financial and HR services, reduce the costs, and offer other benefits. So I'm pleased to make this announcement that Synergy Insight CPA firm, which is owned by our director, Jeremy Anderson, our finance director, who's been a valuable part of the Oregon Ministry Network for over a decade, has been selected to be that partner. Jeremy and the Synergy Insight team sees their work not just as numbers, but it's a calling to serve with integrity, to serve with wisdom, excellence, reflecting God's kingdom in everything that they do. if you can remember back to Summit, just back in April, we saw Jeremy's heart on display when he gave his financial report. We saw his heart. The Oregon Ministry knows that Jeremy and the Synergy team will maintain the highest ethical standards. They're going to deliver excellence in the area of finance as well as HR services. They're going to honor God, and they're going to support our ministry and our churches. We know that Synergy is deeply familiar with the Oregon Ministry Network. They know who we are. They know our values, our mission, our strategy, and they support our mission. Synergy is the Oregon Ministry Network. It was birthed out of the Oregon Ministry Network, just like Jen Phi was, who's going to be our premier host. We're going to meet in just a moment. Many years ago, as CEP was birthed out of the Oregon Ministry Network. Now, this change is going to allow the Oregon Ministry Network to focus more time and resources on our mission while maintaining expert finances, financial and HR services. So you may say, well, when is this going to happen? Well, it's already started. This fall, we're focusing on communication, letting our churches and our clients already know about what's going to be happening. Then in January, our network affiliated churches, our general council churches that use that service, as well as future churches, will move to the Synergy Insights in January. And then the Oregon Ministry Network will become a client of Synergy Insights in July of 2026, completing that process. So that's how it's going to unfold over the next 8 or 9 months. And we're excited about the future of what God has for Synergy Insights and what this is going to allow us to do as the Oregon Ministry Network to stay on mission on what God's called us to do. So I don't know if I missed anything, Pastor Lee, but...
No, I think that's a good summary. I just want to say publicly, you guys have some of the greatest elders, presbyters, and deacons, area leaders, that anybody could ever hope to have. These are men and women of vision. They're men and women that have a good grasp on current culture, and they are men and women of prayer. And I'm honored to serve beside them, and these decisions are made by them, and I think as time goes on, you will see that it will help us. We have to continue to adjust financially in such a way that we can stick with our mission, and we want to invest more in our churches and our ministers. This will help us do that. Yeah, more than $70,000 a year. This will save us to help us to do this. So we are very, very excited about that.